Welcome back to today's episode on the Conference of the Future of Europe. Today we will be talking about the regulation of sporting matters at the European Union level. We see that one of Europeans' aims and values is establishing an internal market through a highly competitive market economy, but this in balance with social justice and social values. I have a colleague here today, Alirizat Ostur, to discuss recent developments in the case of regulations in sporting matters. So before we get to the recent developments, perhaps you could briefly explain to us how sporting matters are regulated in the European Union.
Well, thank you, Julie. The governing of sporting matters in the EU has generally been left to their respective sporting bodies, such as UEFA, FIFA, and FIBA, and so on. And ever since the famous Bosman judgment of the CJEU, the decisions of sporting bodies who has no economic activity were not subject to EU laws. However, with the case Mecca Medina in 2006, the court changed its position. The court stated that sporting bodies must respect the proportionality principle and the legitimacy principle of the EU laws. Otherwise, they would be subject to EU law, especially EU competition law.
I see, but why competition law? Isn't there a sports law section within the European treaties or provisions?
Well, this is an excellent question, Julie, because it brings us to today's topic. There is not a sports law section in EU treaties. Sporting matters are regulated by their sporting bodies, and as I said, they have to respect EU principles and especially competition law due to the close link between them. And this makes the situation somewhat clouded because we can see at times it is not clear when sporting bodies can be autonomous and when they cannot, as they are subject to competition law.
And could you give us an example perhaps of this clash that you've mentioned?
Yes, I can. Actually, I based my research on the very recent case of European Super League to discuss this issue.
The famous European Super League. Could you actually give us the facts of the case?
Well, certainly. So the case is about a project called European Super League. Last year, in April, the biggest football clubs in Europe proposed this project. According to this plan, the most prestigious football clubs, including Real Madrid, Arsenal, and Juventus, and 12 other clubs, were going to set up their own league, and they were no longer going to participate in European competitions. And of course, UEFA and all the other national federations objected to this plan very strictly. And interestingly, the players, the fans, and even the politicians also criticized this plan because it was seen very greedy by these rich clubs. The biggest criticism was the fact that there was no relegation system, which is clearly against the European pyramid structure.
So the sports of integrity has been impacted in a sense. So what happened after that? Did the clubs cancel the project because of UEFA did not allow it?
Well, most of the clubs, especially English clubs, abandoned this project, but not because of UEFA. They abandoned their plans because of the reaction of their own fans. There were big protests in April. However, Spanish clubs still want to continue with the project as they claim that UEFA's conduct was against EU competition law. In fact, they sued UEFA before their national authority, and the Spanish court referred the case to the CJEU. And the case is pending now before the CJEU, and I can clearly say that it will definitely be one of the landmark cases in sports law.
It probably will. And more specifically, could you explain to us what the legal issue in this case is? And could you briefly perhaps explain the positions of the different parties?
Well, yes. Here in this case, we have the remaining European Super League clubs as the applicant, and we have the UEFA as the defendant. The clubs are claiming that UEFA abused its dominant position and restricted competition unfairly, which is against EU competition provisions, specifically Article 101 and 102 of TFEU. On the other hand, UEFA, as the defendant, claims that it tries to protect the European pyramid structure. Therefore, it shouldn't be subject to competition rules. And we can clearly see the clash we talked in the beginning of our discussions. On the one hand, there are the clubs who claim that their rights of competition law were infringed. On the other hand, there is UEFA who says that it tries to protect the integrity of the sport and the pyramid structure.
Of course, this makes sense actually. And my last question will be here: how important is this case, and how do you think it actually could be important in the future?
Well, the decision will be given by the CJEU will definitely be a milestone for the regulation of sports in the EU. CJEU's interpretation towards the clash we talked will be so important, because it will provide us a balance to see when these social values protected by sporting bodies, such as the things we said, pyramid structure and integrity of the sport, prevail over the other sections of EU laws like competition law or vice versa. So in conclusion, I can say that the direction that the court will take will be very important for the future of sporting matters in the EU. That's why I want to talk about this topic, because it's clearly related to the conference on the future of Europe.
Of course, since sports are part of the European Union's interests and values.
Exactly.
So we've come to the end of today's discussion. Thank you, Ali Riza Öztürk, for intervening on this very interesting topic, which is the regulation of European sports bodies and regarding the application of competition law. Thank you.
Thank you.